My name is Nora Caldwell. I'm an architect, which is another way of saying I spend my life trying to create order from chaos, to build structures that are not only sound, but also feel like a sanctuary. I live in Port Blossom, a city that weeps with rain for half the year, a gentle, persistent drumming on the window panes that I find more comforting than sunshine. The sky is often a soft, pearlescent gray, the color of thought, and the air smells of damp earth and roses. I've built a life here that feels like one of my designs: clean lines, honest materials, and a quiet strength that can withstand the weather. My husband, Owen, a man whose hands are perpetually dusted with soil from his work as a landscape designer, is the garden that surrounds my structure, bringing life and color to my quiet spaces. Our home is our haven, a testament to the peace we've cultivated together. It is a peace I fought for, a peace I built brick by deliberate brick, because the foundation I was given was cracked from the beginning. For my 34th birthday, my parents sent me a gift box. Owen looked at it and said, "Don't open it." I asked why, my voice still light with the calm of the morning. Then I looked closer, truly looked, and the air in my lungs turned to ice. I didn't open it. Instead, I did something else. 30 minutes later, the police were at our door. The day had begun so beautifully. Birthdays, for me, are not about celebration but about quiet reflection. I have no desire for parties or grand pronouncements. My ideal birthday is exactly what this one was shaping up to be: waking to the smell of freshly brewed coffee, Owen placing a warm mug in my hands as I sat propped against the pillows, the gray morning light filtering through the Douglas firs outside our bedroom window. He'd made blueberry pancakes, my favorite, and the only sound was the gentle hiss of the rain and the soft scratch of our dog, Barney, dreaming on the rug. It was everything I ever wanted. The call from my mother had come the day before. Her voice, when it came through the phone, was strange. It was coated in a thick, sweet lacquer of affection that she rarely used, a tone usually reserved for my younger sister, Clara. "Nora, darling," she'd chirped. "We've sent a little something for your birthday. It should be arriving right on time." Right on time. My parents' timing was a concept as abstract as quantum physics. It only ever seemed to align with the gravitational pull of my sister's needs. I gave a non-committal, "Oh, okay. Thank you." A giggle traveled down the line. A brittle, unfamiliar sound. My mother didn't giggle. "It's nothing big," she'd added. "Just a little token to show you how much we love you." That was the moment a small, cold stone dropped into the pit of my stomach. Not because of the sentiment itself, but because of its startling rarity. The word love, from my parents, was usually a preamble to a request or a criticism veiled as concern. "We love you, Nora, but you're so sensitive. We love you, but you need to learn to be more flexible." For it to be offered freely, with no strings attached, felt less like a gift and more like a warning. But even after a lifetime of learning to expect the bare minimum, a foolish, hopeful part of my heart whispered, maybe this time is different. Maybe they're finally trying. They weren't trying. They were planning. So when the doorbell rang, interrupting the quiet harmony of our morning, a flicker of that manufactured hope remained. Owen answered it, his brow furrowed slightly. He returned carrying a medium-sized cardboard box. It was aggressively plain. No festive paper, no cheerful ribbon, just brown cardboard and clear packing tape applied with a stark, industrial precision. A printed shipping label was slapped crookedly on the top. He set it on our polished concrete kitchen island, and we both just stared at it. It seemed to absorb the light in the room. "That'll be from my parents," I said, trying for a casual tone. "Mom called yesterday." Owen said nothing. He just circled the box slowly, his eyes narrowed in a way that I knew meant he was seeing not just an object, but the space it occupied and the intention behind it. He does the same with a garden bed, assessing the soil, the light, the drainage, before ever planting a seed. "Don't open it," he said finally, his voice low and certain. A nervous laugh escaped me. "Why? You think it's ticking?" He didn't smile. He just nodded toward the shipping label. "Look at the return address." I leaned in. My heart, which had been beating in a slow, contented rhythm, gave a painful lurch. The return address wasn't their familiar street in Willow Creek. It wasn't even their city. It was a commercial shipping facility on the industrial side of town, a place of warehouses and loading docks. Then Owen stepped closer, tapping the corner of the label with his index finger. "And there," he said softly. "Do you see it?" I followed his gaze, and that's when the world went still. It wasn't a stamp or a sticker. It was a tiny, embossed symbol pressed into the paper of the label itself, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. A stylized bird with a sweeping tail, a sunbird. I had seen it once before. A year ago, I'd seen hundreds of them. The dread that had been a small stone in my stomach now expanded, cold and heavy, filling my entire chest. It was a feeling I recognized. It was the emotional echo of my childhood. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. Owen stepped back, giving me space, his silence a comforting presence beside my own. And in that ringing silence, my phone buzzed on the counter. My mother's name glowed on the screen. Owen's eyes met mine. I saw my own fear and resolve reflected there. I swiped to answer and pressed the speakerphone button. "Darling? Did it arrive?" Her voice was even sweeter this time, thick as honey. I took a steadying breath. Owen stood perfectly still, a silent guardian. "Yes, Mom," I said, my voice surprisingly even. "It just got here." "Oh, wonderful. Did you open it yet?" My eyes were fixed on the unopened box, on that tiny, damning bird. "Yes," I lied. The word felt like ash in my mouth. I opened it. "It's lovely. Thank you so much." A sigh of what sounded like relief whispered down the line. "Oh, good. We just wanted to remind you how much we love you, Nora. You've always been our rock. So strong." My stomach clenched. Our rock. The family anchor, the one they tethered their unstable ship to, expecting me to hold fast in any storm they created. She'd never called me that to my face before. It was a title they assigned to me in my absence, a justification for their neglect. "Well," she trilled, her voice a little too high-pitched. "We just thought you deserved something beautiful. You've always handled everything so well." Then, before I could respond, she hung up. The silence that followed was heavier than before. The box sat between us on the island, a silent monument to a betrayal I was only just beginning to understand. "I hate how nice she was," I whispered, the words trembling slightly. "I know," Owen said, his voice a low rumble. He came and wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "She only uses that voice when she's about to ask for something impossible or lie about something unforgivable." "They never send gifts," I continued, leaning back into his warmth. "Remember Christmas? Clara got that $5,000 interactive workout mirror, and I got a half-melted vanilla-scented candle from a gas station." Owen managed a small, grim laugh. I think the wick had already been lit. We stood there for a long time, just holding each other. I had the urge to hurl the box into the street, to watch it shatter on the wet asphalt. But I also wanted to understand the full scope of what they had done. We didn't touch it again. Owen made tea, strong and sweet, and we sat at the kitchen table, watching the box as if it were a venomous snake coiled in the center of our sanctuary. It said nothing, and yet it was screaming. 30 minutes later, there was a firm, official-sounding knock on our front door. Not a neighbor stopping by, not a delivery driver. It was a sound with weight and purpose. Owen and I exchanged a look. I went to the door and opened it to find 2 uniformed police officers on our porch, the rain dripping from the brims of their caps. "Ma'am, are you Nora Caldwell?" the taller one asked, his expression neutral. I nodded, my throat tight. "We've received an anonymous tip regarding a suspicious package delivered to this address today. Do you mind if we come in and ask a few questions?" And that is where the life I had so carefully constructed began to fracture. To understand how, you need to understand the architect of my family's chaos. You need to understand Clara. Clara is my younger sister by 3 years, but she has always seemed to exist in a different dimension, one where consequences are for other people. If my emotional landscape is a carefully tended bonsai tree, requiring patience and precision, hers is a field of wildflowers, beautiful but chaotic, growing wherever the wind happens to carry the seeds. I was the responsible one, she was the magical one. I was duty, she was delight. She was the golden child, not because she excelled, but because she was fragile. Her tears were a currency my parents accepted without question. My stoicism, my ability to quietly endure, was treated not as a strength but as a defect, an emotional deficiency. The first time I took the blame for her, I was 8 years old. We had an ugly ceramic lamp in the entryway, a garish thing of mottled brown and orange that my mother inexplicably cherished. One afternoon, a loud crash echoed through the house. I walked out of my room to find Clara standing amid the porcelain shards, her bottom lip trembling in a perfect, heart-wrenching pout. I knew, with the bone-deep certainty of a seasoned diplomat, exactly what was about to happen. When my mother rushed in, her face a mask of fury, Clara's small finger shot out and pointed at me. "Nora did it," she whispered. Just like that. No hesitation. Clean, simple, and utterly devastating. I hadn't been anywhere near the lamp. But I saw the storm gathering in my mother's eyes and the tears welling in my sister's, and I made a calculated decision. I said nothing. I was the big sister. It was my job to be the shock absorber. My mother sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "Nora, you need to be more careful. You know your sister looks up to you." I was sent to my room without dinner. Clara got a bowl of ice cream and a hug. The lesson was etched into my soul. My truth was irrelevant. Her feelings were paramount. This pattern repeated itself endlessly. When I was 13, I saved up my allowance for months to buy a small, second-hand telescope. It was my prize, my private window to the stars. Clara, in a fit of pique because I wouldn't let her use it unsupervised, accidentally knocked it over, cracking the main lens. When I cried, a rare and shocking event, my father took me aside. "You know how she is, Nora," he'd said gently. "You shouldn't have left it where she could get to it. You have to be the mature one." Mature was just another word for invisible. Her carelessness was my responsibility. Her whims were my burden. As we grew into adults, our relationship became a fragile détente, a carefully maintained peace for our parents' benefit. Clara drifted through life on a cloud of artistic aspirations and borrowed money. She became a certified Reiki healer, a short-lived artisan soap maker, and a lifestyle curator, which seemed to involve taking beautifully lit photos of other people's art and posting them on Instagram with vague, inspirational quotes. My parents called it finding herself. "She has such a creative spirit," my mother would say, a defensive edge to her voice. "Not everyone is meant for the 9-to-5 world, Nora." I never said that I wanted her to fit a mold. I just wanted her to pay back the $2,000 she'd borrowed for a vision quest to Sedona, a debt she seemed to have conveniently forgotten. But I kept quiet, watching from my self-imposed emotional distance as my parents continued to pave her path with their enabling and my silent acquiescence. About a year before the box arrived, the dynamic shifted. My mother invited me to lunch, just the two of us, a rare and therefore suspicious occasion. We met at a chic bistro overlooking the Willamette River. When I arrived, Clara was already there, sipping a green smoothie and looking artfully disheveled. It was an ambush. After a few minutes of strained pleasantries, Clara launched her offensive. "So, Nora," she began, her smile a little too bright. "I'm starting this new venture. It's called Sunbird Home. Really high-end, artisan-crafted decor from overseas. The thing is, the main supplier is really exclusive. To get an account, you have to have a pristine credit history and a registered business partner." I was thinking, since you're so organized and stable, maybe you could be my silent partner? Just on paper. It wouldn't mean anything. Stable. The word they always used for me. It meant boring. It meant predictable. It meant I could be relied upon to clean up the mess. My mother jumped in. "We just thought it would be a wonderful way for you to support your sister's dream, darling. It's just paperwork. You're so good with all that." For years, I would have said yes. I would have sighed, felt the familiar weight of resentment settle on my shoulders, and agreed. For them. For the sake of a peace that was never really peaceful at all. But something in me had shifted. Maybe it was the quiet strength I'd found with Owen, or the simple satisfaction of building a life on my own terms. I looked at their hopeful, expectant faces, and for the first time, I chose myself. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it landed in the center of the table with the force of a gavel. I'm sorry, Clara, but I can't do that. Clara's smile froze and then melted away. My mother's face hardened. The rest of the lunch was a cold, stilted affair. After that day, a chill set in. It wasn't a dramatic falling out, but a slow, deliberate icing over. Invitations to family dinners stopped coming. My father sent me a clipped email about the importance of familial loyalty. Clara unfollowed me on all social media. I told myself it was for the best. The silence was a relief, a balm on a wound that had been open my entire life. I had built a fortress of peace, and I believed I was finally safe inside it. But when that box landed on my doorstep, bearing the subtle insignia of the very business I had refused to be a part of, I understood. They hadn't respected my boundary. They had simply found a way to breach the walls. The two officers, whose names were Russo and Kim, were professional and disarmingly calm. I led them into the kitchen, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Owen stood a few feet behind me, a silent, steady presence. "That's the package," I said, gesturing to the box on the island. It looked even more menacing under the scrutiny of the law. "It's addressed to you, Miss Caldwell?" Detective Russo asked. "Yes. My parents said it was a birthday present." "And you haven't opened it?" "No." He nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the box. "Would you mind if we did?" "Please," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. I wanted it gone. They worked with a methodical quietness that I, as an architect, appreciated. Officer Kim put on a pair of nitrile gloves while Detective Russo carefully sliced through the packing tape with a small utility knife. He lifted the cardboard flaps. Inside was a nest of white packing peanuts. He gently removed them, revealing several objects wrapped in bubble wrap. He carefully unwrapped the first one. It was a small wooden bird, carved and painted to look like an exotic species, resting on a polished wooden base. He unwrapped two more. They were similar, all part of a set. Tucked at the bottom was a folded document. Detective Russo picked it up with 2 fingers. It was a certificate of authenticity for Sunbird Home, declaring the pieces to be ethically sourced and hand-carved by indigenous artisans in Southeast Asia. And at the bottom, in bold print, imported and distributed by Nora Caldwell, Sunbird Home, Port Blossom. My name, my city. My blood ran cold. Officer Kim pulled out his phone and scanned a tiny QR code on the bottom of one of the wooden birds. He read something on his screen and then gave Russo a look I couldn't decipher. "Ms. Caldwell, do you know what these are?" Russo asked, his voice still level. "They look like decorative carvings," I said, my voice thin. "We believe they are part of a shipment of counterfeit goods," he explained calmly. "The wood is not what it's claimed to be, and these are mass-produced replicas of legally protected artisanal designs. The company, Sunbird Home, is under investigation for several trade violations and wire fraud." Fraud. The word hung in the air, heavy and toxic. "Do you have any proof that your parents sent this to you?" he asked. I thought of the phone call, the cloying sweetness, the carefully chosen words. With a slightly trembling hand, I picked up my phone from the table. "I recorded the call from my mother this morning," I said. I played it for them. My mother's voice filled the quiet kitchen, bright and false. "Did you open it yet? We just wanted to remind you how much we love you, Nora. You've always been our rock. So strong." When it finished, Detective Russo nodded grimly. The mask of professional neutrality slipped for just a second, and I saw a flicker of something that looked like pity. "We're going to need to take the package and its contents as evidence," he said. "You're not being charged with anything at this time, Ms. Caldwell. Your cooperation has been very helpful." They carefully packed everything back into the box, sealing it with evidence tape. As they walked toward the door, Owen followed them, asking a few quiet questions. I sank into one of the chairs at the kitchen table, my legs suddenly unable to support me. My birthday coffee was still sitting there, cold now. The peaceful morning felt like a dream from a lifetime ago. They had done it. They had found the one way to shatter my peace. They hadn't just disrespected my boundary, they had used my name to commit a crime and then gift-wrapped the evidence and sent it to my front door. They hadn't just hoped I would take the fall, they had orchestrated it. 3 hours later, as the rain began to fall again, my phone rang. It was my mother. I answered, my hand steady this time. Her voice was no longer sweet. It was sharp and cold, like splintered ice. What did you do? I didn't answer. You told them, didn't you? You told the police it was from us. Her voice cracked with a mixture of rage and panic. You've ruined everything, Nora. You've ruined your sister's life. I told them the truth, I said, my voice a low, flat monotone. I told them you sent me a package. The one you called to make sure had arrived safely. There was a choked sound, and then my father's voice, heavy and disappointed, came on the line. We didn't have a choice, Nora. They were getting close. If the shipment was found at her place, they would have arrested her on the spot. We thought if it came to you, as a gift, they'd just confiscate the items and that would be the end of it. A simple seizure. Contained. The coldness of his logic was breathtaking. So you sent stolen goods to my house, with a fraudulent certificate bearing my name, and hoped I'd be foolish enough to take possession of them. Silence. Then, my mother's voice returned, laced with the venom of self-justification. We thought you could handle it. You're the strong one, remember? You've always been so resilient. And there it was. The core of it all. My strength was not a quality they admired, it was a resource they exploited. Clara isn't built for this kind of pressure, my father added, his voice pleading. She would crumble. And I am? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Then my mother delivered the final, devastating blow, the line that severed the last thread of familial obligation I ever felt. You don't have children, Nora. Your life is simpler. You don't have as much to lose. We knew you would bounce back. You don't have as much to lose. They had weighed my life, my career, my home, my peace, my future with Owen against my sister's, and found mine wanting. I was disposable. I was the acceptable loss. You have always been the cold one, my mother spat, her voice thick with tears that, for once, I knew were for herself. And now look at the damage you've caused. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. I ended the call, the quiet click of the button a definitive, final sound. Owen came back into the kitchen and wordlessly wrapped a warm blanket around my shoulders. He sat across from me, his presence a silent anchor in the storm. I stared at the empty space on the island where the box had been. It felt like a fresh wound. They really thought I'd just let it happen, I whispered, more to myself than to him. They thought I'd open the box and take the blame. Owen reached across the table and took my hand. His was warm and steady. They miscalculated, he said softly. They've spent so long seeing you as a foundation, they forgot you're also the architect. And in the wreckage of my birthday, I knew he was right. They had tried to demolish the life I had built. Now, it was time for me to draw up a new set of plans. A week drifted by in a haze of quiet tension. The house was the same, the rain still fell, but the peace felt fragile, as if we were living in the calm eye of a hurricane. Then Detective Russo called again. Miss Caldwell, he said, his tone all business. We need to confirm a few more details. We've subpoenaed the records for Sunbird Home. Your name appears on the initial business registration documents as a co-owner. I felt a wave of nausea. That's impossible. There's a digital signature on the application, filed 14 months ago, and a business email address linked to the account. We'd like you to look at them. He emailed the files. I opened them on my laptop, Owen looking over my shoulder. There it was, a business license for Sunbird Home, LLC. And under owners, Clara's name and mine. My old address, from before Owen and I bought our house, was listed as the official place of business. The signature was a crude, clumsy forgery of my name, like someone trying to trace it from memory. The email was nora.designs@sunbird.net. Is that your signature? The detective asked when I called him back. No, I said, my voice shaking with a cold, quiet rage. It's a forgery. And the email? I've never seen it before in my life. Could anyone in your family have had access to documents with your signature or personal information? A driver's license, a passport? My mind flashed back years, to helping my parents with their taxes, to leaving a folder of personal documents at their house when I was moving, trusting they would be safe. Yes, I said, the word tasting like poison. Years ago. I trusted them. It was the last time I would ever say that phrase. I spent the rest of the afternoon drafting a formal, notarized statement. I declared, under penalty of perjury, that I had never consented to be a partner in Sunbird Home, that my signature was forged, and that the business was operated entirely without my knowledge or consent. I attached a copy of the lunch receipt from the bistro, a petty but satisfying piece of evidence showing the date I had explicitly refused Clara's request. I sent it all to Detective Russo. He thanked me for my continued cooperation and said they would be in touch. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the anxious quiet of waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was the heavy, somber silence of inevitability. The news came not from a phone call, but from a small article in the digital edition of the Port Blossom Chronicle under the heading Local Business Owners Charged in Fraud Scheme. Clara was charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and violations of international trade agreements. My parents were charged with conspiracy and accessory to fraud. I didn't go to the court hearings. I couldn't bear to witness the performance, Clara's artful tears, my mother's martyred stoicism. But I read the court transcripts online. My name was mentioned dozens of times, always as the unwitting victim whose identity had been stolen. There was no mention of an apology. They pled guilty to lesser charges to avoid a trial. Clara received 2 years of probation and a fine that would likely take her a lifetime to pay off. My parents received suspended sentences and were ordered to complete 200 hours of community service. Their names, their carefully curated reputations in their quiet suburban world, were now a matter of public record. A month later, after the dust had settled, they asked to meet. Just my parents. They chose a sterile, impersonal coffee shop halfway between their town and my city, a no-man's land of lukewarm coffee and stale pastries. I arrived 10 minutes late, a small act of defiance. They were already there, sitting in a booth, looking smaller and older than I remembered. My mother had rehearsed a look of pained sincerity. My father just looked tired. We didn't know she used your name for the official registration, Nora, my mother began, her voice soft and placating. You knew she was using me, I replied, my voice calm. You just didn't care about the details. She told us it was just for shipping, my father mumbled into his coffee cup. She told you what you wanted to hear. And you chose to believe her, because the alternative was holding her accountable. It was easier to offer me up instead. That's not fair, my mother protested, a flicker of her old fire returning. We were trying to protect our family. You were trying to protect her, I corrected. You decided that I was the part of the family that could be sacrificed. My mother fell back on her final, most used defense. The one that had defined my life. You've always been stronger than her, Nora. We just thought, you would be okay. I looked at them, at these two people who had given me life, and then spent that life asking me to carry the weight of someone else's. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a profound, bottomless sense of release. The burden wasn't mine to carry. It never had been. You're right, I said, and they both looked up, surprised. I am strong. I'm strong enough to know that this is over. I stood up, leaving my own untouched coffee on the table. A family doesn't sacrifice its members to save one part of it. A family weathers the storm together. You aren't a family. You're just her enablers. I walked out of the coffee shop and didn't look back. The air outside was crisp and clean. That night, I sat on the couch with my laptop. I went through my contacts, my email, my emergency forms. I deleted their names. I blocked their numbers. I removed every digital and emotional access point they had to my life. It wasn't an act of anger or revenge. It was an act of architecture. I was reinforcing my walls, not to keep the world out, but to keep my sanctuary safe. The next morning, Owen brought me coffee in bed, just as he had on my birthday. The sun, for the first time in weeks, was breaking through the gray clouds, casting long, golden shafts of light through the trees and onto our bedroom floor. He sat on the edge of the bed and watched me for a moment. Are you okay? He asked softly. I took a sip of the hot, rich coffee. I thought of the box, the lies, the cold calculation in my parents' voices. I thought of the quiet, steely resolve I had found within myself. I thought of the life Owen and I had built, a structure founded on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. A structure that had been tested and had held. A genuine smile touched my lips, maybe for the first time in a month. I am now, I said. And for the first time, it felt completely, unshakably true.